She's family, my mother said. Like those two words were supposed to dissolve everything. The lease I'd signed, the furniture I'd moved, the deposit I'd scraped together from 18 months of doubles at the hospital. Like those two words were a master key. My brother had called her first. Of course he did. He always called her first. I found out on a Thursday. I was 3 hours into a 12-hour shift in the ICU, standing at the nursing station eating a granola bar over a keyboard, when my phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor, Sylvia. "Hey, just wanted to let you know there's been a moving truck outside your place since this morning. Wasn't sure if you knew." I read it 3 times. I had not told anyone I was moving. My name is Fiona. I'm 31 years old. I'm a registered nurse in Ottawa, and I own a semi-detached on La Perriere Avenue that I bought 14 months ago with a down payment I saved while eating discount pasta and skipping vacations for 4 years straight. It is not a big house. It has 2 bedrooms, a small backyard with a dying rosebush the previous owner left behind, and a kitchen with a window that faces east, so the morning light comes in yellow and slow. I love that house more than I have loved most things in my adult life. My brother Joel is 36. He's been between jobs, between apartments, and between promises for the better part of a decade. His girlfriend Tamara has a 7-year-old daughter Lily from a previous relationship. They are not bad people. I want to be clear about that, because nothing that follows is simple, and if I frame it like it is, I'm doing the same thing my mother does, flattening people into roles so the story makes sense. They are not bad people. They made a bad choice. Several, actually. And my parents handed them the tools. My spare key existed for one reason. 8 months ago, I had a water leak under the kitchen sink while I was on a night shift stretch. My mother lived 20 minutes away. I gave her the key so she could let the plumber in. I asked for it back afterward. She said she dropped it in her purse. I believed her. I finished my shift at 7 in the morning. I drove home on autopilot, that familiar post-night shift fog sitting behind my eyes. I noticed the truck first, a budget rental, half unloaded, parked at an angle on the street like whoever drove it was in a hurry. Then I noticed the boxes on my porch. Then I noticed my front door was open. My mother was standing in my kitchen making coffee, not her coffee. My coffee, in my machine, in my mug, the blue one from my nursing school graduation that said RN, Real Ninja, that my roommate had given me as a joke. Joel was in my living room assembling what appeared to be a particle board bookshelf. Tamara was on the stairs with Lily, explaining to her where her bedroom would be. I stood in my own doorway. My mother looked up. She did not flinch. "Oh, you're off early," she said. "I'm off on time," I said. "What is happening right now?" It was not a question. It came out flat, like I'd run out of room at the end of it. She set down my mug and wiped her hands on a dish towel that was also mine. "Joel's building fell through," she said. "The landlord sold the property and the new owners aren't renewing any leases. They had to be out by Wednesday." She said it the way people announce the weather. Unfortunate, unavoidable, already past. "Mom, you have 2 bedrooms and it's just you." She picked up the mug again. "The couch in the den pulls out into a bed too," I measured. I looked at the shelf Joel was assembling. There were more boxes behind him. Big ones. The kind you use for a long stay. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked. She tilted her head just slightly. "We just found out about Joel's place last week." That's not what I asked. She turned back to the counter. "Come have some coffee, Fiona. You look tired. We can talk about the arrangement." The arrangement. Already named. Already a thing with structure and permanence. I stood there for a long moment. Lily had come downstairs and was peeking around the corner at me with enormous eyes. She's 7 and she's sweet and she had absolutely nothing to do with any of this, and I knew, standing in my own kitchen, watching my mother pour coffee into my mug, that this was exactly what they were counting on. Lily's presence was not incidental, it was the shield. I took a breath. Then I did something that surprised all of them, including me. I smiled. "You're right," I said. "Let's talk about the arrangement." My mother's shoulders dropped half an inch. Relief. She thought she'd won the argument before it started. I pulled out a chair at my kitchen table, the table I'd bought at a garage sale in Westboro, and sanded and stained myself, and I sat down. "I've actually been thinking about getting some help around the house," I said. "Between my shifts, I can't keep up with everything." Joel had stopped assembling the shelf. He was watching me with his head tilted, suspicious the way he always was when things went too smoothly. "What kind of help?" Tamara asked from the doorway. "A property caretaker," I said. "It's actually a formal arrangement. I've looked into it before. A lot of homeowners do it when they're working long hours. The person living in the property helps with maintenance, keeps the place up, takes in deliveries, manages any contractor visits. In exchange, they get reduced accommodation costs." I paused. "It might actually work really well for you guys while you get back on your feet." My mother beamed. "See, this is what family does. I'll need a signed agreement though," I said, "for insurance purposes. My mortgage terms require it. If someone's living in the property and something happens, I need documentation showing the arrangement. Otherwise, my coverage could be void." Joel frowned. "We don't need a contract. We're family." "I know," I said. "But my insurance company doesn't." I looked at him steadily. "If you want to stay here, it has to be done right. I'm not willing to risk losing the house over paperwork." That was the word that moved him. Losing the house. If I lost the house over some technicality, there was no arrangement at all. Joel was always better at self-interest than principle. "Fine," he said. "Whatever you need to put on paper." I told him I needed an hour to draft something up. I said I was going to shower and change and I'd have something ready by noon. My mother patted my hand. "I knew you'd come around," she said. I went upstairs to my bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the edge of my bed. I was not writing a rental lease. In Ontario and in most Canadian provinces, a lease creates a landlord-tenant relationship that falls under residential tenancy legislation. That means formal notice periods, tribunal hearings, sheriff's orders. Even if someone has no legal right to be in your home, the moment you accept rent or create a lease, you've started a clock that can take months to stop. I had looked all of this up before. Not because I planned for this exact scenario, but because I am a nurse. I planned for contingencies. What I was going to write was a caretaker services agreement, legally distinct. The occupant is classified as a service provider, not a tenant. They're there in exchange for performing specific duties, not in exchange for paying rent. No tenancy is created. No rights under the Residential Tenancies Act apply. If the service agreement is terminated, for any reason, the license to occupy the property terminates simultaneously. They become a trespasser, not a tenant. The police can remove them without a tribunal order. I opened my laptop. I was not tired anymore. I spent 50 minutes writing the most carefully worded 4-page document of my life. I have been on shift when patients coded and I have stayed calm. I stayed calm now. I buried the critical clauses in the middle sections, between the benefit language and the insurance provisions. Clause 3.2, occupation of the premises is provided solely as a condition of the Caretaker Services Agreement and does not constitute tenancy under the Residential Tenancies Act, 2006. Clause 7.1, termination of this agreement for any reason results in immediate revocation of the license to occupy the property. The service provider agrees to vacate within 24 hours of written notice of termination. Clause 9.4, the homeowner reserves the right to conduct video monitoring of common areas for property protection and insurance documentation purposes. Clause 11.2, the service provider consents to a background check for insurance bonding verification. I also wrote in the benefits clearly up front where they would look. No rent owing, utilities included. Use of common areas. And then, the greed hook, the thing I knew Joel wouldn't be able to ignore. I added a line about being listed as an emergency contact on my benefits plan for the purpose of group pharmacy coverage. Not health insurance, pharmacy only. But I said it in language that implied much more, and I knew Joel wouldn't read it carefully enough to notice the difference. I printed 4 copies on my wireless printer, paperclipped them, and walked downstairs. Joel and Tamara were sitting at the kitchen table. My mother had made sandwiches. "Benefits?" Joel said about 30 seconds into reading. He'd gone straight to the compensation section. I knew he would. "Group plan through the hospital," I said. "Limited, but it covers prescriptions. Lily's probably due for a dental checkup. That's covered under the pharmacy rider." Tamara looked up. "Dental?" "Basic preventive, yes." I kept my voice level. This was technically a misrepresentation, and I was not proud of it, but it was not in the document. The document was clean. Sign and we can get her set up Monday. Tamara clicked the pen before Joel did. My mother witnessed it. She signed the witness line with a little flourish, the way she signs Christmas cards. I collected the copies. Kept 2, gave them 1. "Great," I said. "I'll activate the new door codes this afternoon. Fire safety update. The manual lock on the back door sticks, so I'm replacing it next week. In the meantime, don't rely on it. I hugged my mother. I shook Joel's hand. I told Tamara she could use the good towels in the hall closet. Then I said I had some errands, took my keys, and left. I drove to the Residence Inn on Terry Fox Drive and checked into a room with a desk and a good Wi-Fi connection. I ordered a bowl of fro from a place on Eagleson that delivered until midnight, and I opened the security app on my phone. The cameras had been installed 7 months ago, after a break-in 2 streets over. I had not mentioned them to Joel. The caretaker agreement authorized them. His signature authorized them. My living room, kitchen, and front hallway were now feeding live 1080p footage directly to my phone. I watched my kitchen for a while. Lily was eating a sandwich. Tamara was unpacking a box of books and arranging them on the shelf Joel had finished. Joel was on his phone. My mother was still there, moving things around in my cupboards, reorganizing my dishes into an order that made sense to her and no one else. It looked almost domestic, almost normal. At 9:45 that evening, my mother left. 20 minutes after her taillights disappeared from the feed, Joel got up and went to the front door. I leaned forward. He came back holding a Canada Post delivery slip, a notice that a registered letter was waiting at the post office. He turned it over in his hands. Then he went to the front hallway closet and put it behind my winter coats. People don't hide delivery slips for packages they're excited about. I ran the background check the next morning, as authorized under Clause 11.2. In Ontario, background checks for caretaker and property management purposes are permissible. The results came back in 4 hours. Joel had 2 prior evictions, both in the last 3 years, one in Gloucester, one in Canada. He owed $14,200 to his former landlord in Canada in outstanding rent and damages, currently the subject of a small claims court action. The registered letter at the post office was almost certainly a notice from the court or a collection agency. He had moved into my house not just because he was evicted, he was hiding. My building was a glass house, and I had just handed him the blueprints. I called the Canada Post Office and asked them to confirm whether the item required identification for pickup. They said yes. Then I did something that felt strange but was entirely legal. I texted Joel and told him there was a registered letter at the post office in his name and that it needed to be picked up with ID within 5 business days or it would be returned to sender. He read the message. He did not reply. That afternoon, the kitchen camera showed him smoking indoors. Sitting at my kitchen table, ashtray he brought himself, window barely cracked. My house is a smoke-free property. It was listed as such in Clause 4.1 of the agreement, along with no pets and no alterations to the property without written consent. He had been there less than 36 hours. I took screenshots. Timestamped. Saved to cloud. By the end of day 2, I had documented smoking indoors, 4 separate instances, removal of the smoke detector battery in the kitchen. I watched him do it on camera, standing on a chair, Lily drawing on the wall in the second bedroom with what appeared to be a green crayon, and a man I did not recognize letting himself into my house with a key that should not have existed, which meant Joel had made a copy. He had made a copy of a door code override key that the previous owner had left. He found it in the kitchen junk drawer. I sent the termination notice by email at 11:30 p.m. on day 3. Dear Joel, pursuant to Clause 7.1 of the Caretaker Services Agreement dated date, this notice serves as formal written termination of said agreement, effective immediately. As per the terms you signed, the license to occupy the property at address is hereby revoked. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises. This is not a tenancy. You are not protected under the Residential Tenancy Act. Should you fail to vacate by 11,050 Nancy's Act, should you fail to vacate by 11,000 p.m. Tomorrow, I will contact Ottawa Police Service and report an unauthorized occupant. I CC'd my mother. My phone started ringing at 11:07. I did not answer. Joel texted, "You can't do this, we have rights. You accepted us as tenants." I replied with one line, "Please review Clause 3.2 of the agreement you signed." My mother called 6 times before midnight. On the 7th attempt, I picked up. "Fiona, this is insane. You cannot put a child on the street." "I'm not," I said. "I'm terminating a caretaker agreement. Where Joel and Tamara choose to go is their decision. There are shelters in Ottawa that accept families, and I'm happy to send you a list. Alternatively, they could stay with you." Silence. "You have a 3-bedroom house, Mom," I said, "in Barhaven, with a finished basement." More silence. "This is cruel," she said finally. "Clause 3.2, I said. "Good night." I hung up and turned off my phone. Then I opened my laptop and filed a formal notification with Ottawa Police Service's non-emergency line, not to have anyone arrested, but to place on record that I had issued a written notice to an unauthorized occupant and was documenting the situation. At 4 a.m., my camera showed Joel on his phone in the kitchen. He was pacing. At 4:45, Tamara came downstairs and they had what appeared to be a tense conversation. I didn't have audio in the kitchen, only the living room, but I could read the shape of it. She was scared. He was still arguing. At 9 a.m. on day 4, I called Ottawa Police Service's non-emergency line and told them I had an unauthorized occupant who had been given formal written notice and had not vacated. The officer I spoke to confirmed that because no tenancy existed and I had a signed agreement with the relevant clauses, they could attend to assist with the removal. 2 officers arrived at 10:40 a.m. I was not there. I watched on camera. Joel answered the door. I turned up the audio on the living room feed. I could not hear everything, but I heard one officer say the words, "Not a tenancy matter." And I heard Joel say, "We signed a contract." And I heard the same officer say yes, and that contract says you can be removed in 24 hours. Joel and Tamara were out by 1:15 in the afternoon. They took everything that was theirs. They even took the particle board shelf. Lily's crayon drawing was still on the wall. A green sun with 5 points. I drove back to La Perriere Avenue at 2:75 points. I drove back to La Perriere Avenue at 2 p.m. With a coffee from the bridgehead on Richmond Road, I stood in my kitchen. My mug was in the dish rack where I'd left it. The dishes were rearranged in the order my mother preferred. I put them back the way I'd had them. The background check also confirmed that Joel's former Canada landlord had a small claims judgment being enforced. 3 days later, I called that landlord. He told me that Joel had been dodging a court-ordered collection and had moved specifically to avoid being served. I gave him Joel's new address, my mother's house in Barhaven, where Joel and Tamara had ended up. The court officer served him there the following week. My mother called me twice after that. I let both go to voicemail. The first was angry. The second was quieter, shorter. She didn't say sorry. She said, "I hope you're doing well." It was the closest she'd come. I hired a cleaning company for 2 days. I repainted the second bedroom, a soft sage green that I'd been meaning to pick for months. I replaced the smoke detector battery. I found the delivery slip behind my winter coats and put it in recycling without opening it. Then I sat in my kitchen on a Sunday morning with the east window, doing what it does, flooding the room with that slow yellow light, and I drank my coffee in my mug and my table, and I did not feel victorious. I felt tired and clear-eyed, and something that might have been relief. My mother taught me a lot of things. How to read a weather map, how to make a proper bechamel, how to write a thank you note that doesn't sound like a form letter. She did not teach me this, that the most useful thing about being the responsible one in a family is not the praise. It's that nobody suspects you of having a plan. I had a plan. The key I gave her was for emergencies. Next time, I won't give a key at all. I've thought about this a lot since that Sunday morning when I sat back down at my own kitchen table with my coffee. Not with anger anymore. That burned off somewhere around day 2 at the Residence Inn, but with something slower and more honest. What happened to me wasn't a freak accident of having a bad family. It was the predictable result of a long pattern that I'd let run unchecked for years. Joel had borrowed money he didn't pay back. He'd shown up at my apartment during nursing school, needing a place to crash for a week that stretched to 6. Every time, I absorbed it. Every time, my mother called it family, and I accepted that framing because I didn't have a better word ready. The mistake wasn't giving him a key. The mistake was never establishing clearly and out loud what that key was for and what it wasn't. That's not a failure of love. It's a failure of clarity. And I think those two things get confused a lot, especially in families where one person is doing well and everyone else treats that stability like a community resource. I was not cruel for wanting my home to be mine. I was not selfish for having saved for 4 years and expected to sleep in the place I paid for. Recognizing that took me longer than I'd like to admit. The thing about what Joel did, what my mother enabled, is that it relied entirely on my decency. They moved in because they knew I wouldn't drag a 7-year-old out of a bedroom at midnight. They were right, I wouldn't have. But decency is not the same as surrender, and that's the line I finally learned to draw. I used what I had. I understood the law. I stayed calm. I didn't scream or cry or send a long message at 2 a.m. that I'd regret. I made a plan and I followed it, and when it worked, I didn't feel clever. I felt like I'd finally shown up for myself, the way I showed up for strangers in the ICU every single shift. Tamara and Lily were not villains. Lily drew a green sun on my wall and left it there, and I painted over it in sage green and thought about her for a while. I hope she ends up somewhere stable. I hope Joel figures out how to build a life instead of borrowing pieces of other people's. I genuinely mean that. But I also know now that hoping for someone's growth and subsidizing their dysfunction are two completely different things, and I spent a long time treating them as the same. My mother still hasn't apologized. Not really. I think she believes she did what a mother does, protected one child by leveraging another. What she doesn't see, or won't, is that the child she leveraged had been holding everything together quietly for a decade, and was one bad decision away from losing the only thing she'd ever built just for herself. I kept the house. I repainted the bedroom. The morning light still comes in yellow through the east window, and I still drink my coffee in the same mug. That's enough. That's actually everything.